Now, I have this big long intro written out and everything, but honestly, I don't care enough about that at this point. Happy belated April Fools. Here's a BCP remake with way too many rules. Let's go over them. So, these too many rules are that I must follow the leaked prefix order for the tracks. I must include all tracks revealed before the full reveal trailer. I must order the tour exclusive tracks differently. I can only use tracks in a particular way that they were included in tour prior to the full reveal trailer. And I need to make the BCP make as much sense as possible and make it good. Don't worry, I'll go over all the implications these rules have now. The prefix order was leaked after Wave 1's released, and it looks like this. This list essentially confirms how many tracks I can pull from each game in the franchise and in what order I need to put them. I need to have all 14 Tour City tracks and all 7 Tour Non-City Nitro tracks, along with 2 SNES tracks, 2 164 tracks, 5 GBA tracks, 4 GCN tracks, 4 DS tracks, 6 Wii tracks, 3 3DS tracks, and 1 Wild Space track that I can put any track in. In case you're wondering where the Wild Space comes from, it's because the prefix order has 8 spots for Tour Non-City Nitro tracks to put, but there's only 7 Tour Non-City Nitro tracks in the first place. There are numerous tracks that were leaked before they were revealed for the BCP, and I decided that I would include all of them, as well as the featured tracks in the initial reveal trailers that came out before all of the tracks were revealed. While the Wave 1 initial reveal trailer did have all 8 tracks in Wave 1 in it, I decided to only include the tracks that were actually pulled out of the trailer, those being Chocolate Mountain, Coconut Mall, and Tokyo Blur. Most of these are Tour Cities and Tour Non-City Nitro tracks, so here's all the tracks that actually matter. You can possibly want to take a look at all the tracks if you need, but I'll be referencing them throughout the video anyways. Considering I need to have all the Tour original tracks in the BCP anyways, and I wanted to try and make some changes, I decided to rearrange them to see my liking. This is how the city tracks were originally planned to be based on the file names, and I decided to revert to this order just to make things interesting. I didn't bother with adjusting the non-city nitro tracks, but I did want to point out that Piranha Plant Pipeline will take a spot available for it in the Spiny Cup. This is the list of all the tracks available to be used for each wave. I can only use a track in the waves listed under or a later wave. For example, I can use any track listed under Wave 1 in any wave I want, but GBA Lakeside Park can only be used for Wave 6, and the tracks under Wave 4 can only be used in the latter half of the BCP. And the last rule is pretty self-explanatory, so let's get started. Wave 1 already has 5 of its 8 tracks confirmed thanks to necessary Tour Nitro tracks, and having 2 of its other tracks featured in the initial reveal trailer for this wave. I think I'll start with the 3DS track for this wave because the 3DS tracks are in a very interesting position because there's so many to choose from, and there's only 3 slots to fit them in. Except that's actually a lie because 2 of them got leaked and have to be included, meaning I functionally only have 1 slot left to choose. I don't think either Rock Rock Mountain or Rainbow Road are a good fit for this wave, meaning I have these 8 tracks to pick from. But I think there's even further ways to narrow down which track should go here. Looking at the rest of the Golden Dash Cup, there aren't any Mushroom Cup tracks, which mostly only makes sense in the opening cup, and yet there aren't any Mushroom Cup tracks out of the 3 that are here. So I think it makes most sense to take one of the Mushroom Cup tracks in this game for the slot. Now the 4 tracks here, I've decided to keep Toad's Circuit in this slot. I know that's a controversial choice, but let's talk about it. A lot of people hate Toad Circuit because it's a disappointing track in general, but I think that the biggest issue with this track is that it looks bad, more than anything else. When looking at the big picture, it actually makes a lot of sense to bring Toad Circuit back here. In addition to the Mushroom Cup thing, the Toad Circuit has the distinction of being the first track you play on Tour. And with the BCP being Nintendo's way of bringing Tour content to a bigger audience, not including Tour's starting track alongside its new tracks feels like a very odd choice. In addition, circuits are always needed in Mario Kart games as the generally simpler, more realistic tracks with a lot of floats. The World Toad Circuit fits perfectly, and I do think it's best suited for the spot it's in. For as much flack as Toad Circuit gets for being bland and generic, Daisy Hills and Cheap Cheap Lagoon aren't any better about this, and they don't have the position of being Tour's starter track to help them. Shy Guy Bazaar, on the other hand, is a notably better track overall with its uniqueness and layout, but not only is it not Tour's first track, I actually have another reason to not include it. I'm about to get into now with our GBA track. There aren't a lot of options for GBA tracks this early into the BCP. Bowser's Castle 1 and 2 didn't update the tracks at all, which means adding it doesn't actually add anything to the BCP. And Sky Garden was remade horribly, and causing a lot of controversy when it was revealed for Road 1, so I won't be including it. Then leaves Cheap Cheap Island and Sunset Wild, and while I think Cheap Cheap Island is the better track by far, Sunset Wild was leaked twice, so I have to keep it. At that point, I figured that putting it in Wave 1 makes more sense for a couple of reasons, with the biggest being that if it were in Wave 1, it's likely that it would get updated and be better than what it was even in the real BCP. And while I likely wouldn't have the Sunset, I can dream. This is also the reason that we don't have Shy Guy Bazaar, seeing as Sunset Wilds is our token desert track. And finally for this wave, we have our DS track. Despite there once again not being many options to pick from, it becomes much easier once we remember that we once again have a leaked track that we can pick. And I really don't think there's a better option here than Waluigi Pinball. It would raise excitement for the BCP even further than what Coconut Mall alone did. And while it might seem like I'm using all the heavy hitters now, we also still have to contend with Sunset Wild right after it. Getting the hype going at Wave 1 is really important to get people talking about this DLC. Moving on to Wave 2, a lot of slots are open considering there is no initial reveal trailer for this wave. Starting off, we have our SNES tracks. And it's really difficult to pick from all these choices, knowing that only 2 of the tracks in total will get in. But we do need a Mario Circuit to get in because it was leaked. However, I'm choosing to give myself flexibility in which one it is to make things interesting, instead of just having Mario Circuit 3 completely unchanged from its early iteration. So congratulations to Mario Circuit 2 for making the cut. Next up we have our N64 track, and this really hurts because this is the last N64 track in the BCP. While these all have valid reasons for being included, one of them triumphs over the rest because it's the only one to get a second variation. Calamari doesn't need to be in the BCP, and it's obvious to see why. The last changing makes this one of the best handled retros in the entire franchise, and a refreshing change of pace. The fact that it's here is also why I decided not to save Sunset Wilds for this wave. Moving on to yet another DS track. While there are some good options here, the ones that I think make the most sense is Airship Fortress. It's well spaced for where it is in the BCP, balancing out the 2 Mushroom Cup tracks before it, and it's a fan favorite that unfortunately missed out on a chance in the spotlight in the real world BCP. I may or may not be biased. Next up we have our GBA tracks, and there are 4 of them left for this wave. However, like I talked about in Wave 1, there's only one good one left, so Cheap Island gets a well-deserved spot in Wave 2 of the BCP. And finally we have our second Wii track. We still have way too many tracks that need to be in because they were leaked. Keeping up with the Airship Fortress trend, I think we need another somewhat difficult fan favorite track to keep the excitement going, so I'm filling out this wave with Maple Tree Way. I guess I could have used Koopa Cape, but I don't like how that track was handled, so I'm using Maple Tree Way instead. Now we have Wave 3, which has a few interesting things aside from its 3 tour tracks being needed, and DS Peach Gardens being in the initial reveal trailer. We also have our last 2 3DS tracks in this wave, and considering both of them are leaked and therefore need to be required, I don't think I need to justify putting Rock Mountain at the end of the Rock Cup and Rainbow Road at the end of the Moon Cup. Now we'll finally get our first GCN track, and man, there are not a lot of these. Considering the placement of the track within the wave, I think that the best choice from these 3 is Dino Jungle. It fits perfectly as the second track of the final cup of the row, a place it had both in its debut in Mario Kart Double Dash and its return in Mario Kart 7. And finally we have a GBA track, and while we now have 6 tracks to pick from, 3 of them are flat Unchained Bowser's Castle tracks, and one of them is still Sky Garden, and one of them is too easy for the final wave of the BCP. And the last one was leaked anyways, so I need to include in the BCP somewhere anyways. Bootleg just makes too much sense here in this wave, and even though it was in this wave in the real world BCP anyways, I think this was the best option I could have gone with. We now have Wave 4, and there are now 4 tour tracks thanks to a bunch of cities. However, like I mentioned earlier, I re-mentioned cities a bit, so now Singapore Speedway's moved up to the beginning of the Boomerang Cup to make room for Los Angeles laps at the end, and Amsterdam Drift and Yoshi's Island remain where they were in the Fruit Cup. We still have ourselves a bunch of Wii tracks, and we still need to use some of them because they were leaked. I think DK Summit makes more sense for this wave because it's the easier track overall, so I'm going to put it in this wave. Next up we'll talk about our GCN track, and wow, we have so many options. This ended up being one of the toughest choices in the entire selection. But with a heavy heart, I decided that the winner of this fierce battle is Daisy Cruiser. It's a mighty fine addition to this wave. We now have ourselves the final DS track of PCP. This choice was actually pretty difficult. I went back and forth on this decision a couple times, but I decided that the best choice was Shroom Bridge. While I also think Luigi's Mansion would have done a good job, it did just get Blue Lake a wave prior, and while I would have preferred to use Mario Circuit instead, it wasn't available in time for this wave according to my rules, so I went with the next best option instead. And finally, we have yet another GBA track, and our options are once again somewhat odd. This is one of my least favorite decisions for this entire remake, but I decided to put Riverside Park in this wave. It feels odd to have a Mushroom Cup track after I used 3 Flower Cup tracks in a row, but I don't think I had a better option to put here. We've now reached Wave 5, which once again has its 4 tour tracks divided between 3 cities and 1 non-city. We once again have to pick out a lead track for this wave, and we once again have 2 tracks that need to go in the BCP somewhere. However, with Daisy Circuit being needed for Wave 6 due to it being in the initial reveal trailer for that wave, a rule I followed for N64 Chocolate Mountain, Wii, Coconut Mall, and DS Peach Gardens for Waves 1, 1, and 3 respectively, That leaves Koopa Cape as the lead track for this wave, a choice that I think works out rather well. However, it appears that we have run out of GCN tracks, and we still have 2 more slots that need to be filled. If only there were 2 more GCN tracks added to tour in time for this wave that I could use. Oh hey, look at that. While Waluigi Stadium is technically the only one of the 2 that was confirmed, we do need both of these tracks to fill out the rest of the BCP, and with Waluigi Stadium feeling like a better fit for Wave 6, that means Mushroom Bridge gets to be a part of Wave 5. However, we now get to a very interesting decision, courtesy of our final SNES slot. There aren't any tracks that we need to use, unlike in Wave 2, and while Bowser Castle 3 is an obvious standout due to how much of an overhaul that track found, I think saving a Bowser's Castle for Wave 6 would be a better option, and I don't want to put 2 Bowser's Castle tracks in a row. So I elected not to use it, and instead use Vanilla Lake 1. That might seem like an odd choice, but Vanilla Lake is the only SNES theme to not be brought back as a retro track at any point, and I think this is the perfect opportunity to do so. In case you're wondering why I didn't offer Vanilla Lake 2 instead, both are about equal layout-wise, but the giant fall of water seems rather difficult to translate to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, thanks to both underwater driving and not being an on-rails game like Tour. Vanilla Lake 1 doesn't have this issue, and they could add some underwater paths in between the sparser holes of water throughout the track, similar to what Sherbetland did in the base game. And finally, we have another GBA track, and this was a decision that I labored over for a while as well. Much like last wave of Riverside Park, this isn't a decision that I'm fully confident in, that I went back and forth on for a while, but I don't think I have a better option here than Luigi Circuit. It adds a new rainy aesthetic to the wave that isn't really present anywhere else in the game, and it makes up for the lack of DS Mario Circuit by being a circuit. I know we already have GBA Mario Circuit, which shares the same music track, but I think an updated version of the original theme is needed after Mario Circuit used the beta version of the music track, and the separation between the 2 circuits was over 9 years apart from each other, as compared to the next best option, Yoshi Desert, being only 1 year apart from its fellow GBA Desert track, Sunset Wilds. Adding on to this, there's not a single Luigi theme track in the entirety of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at this point, an issue this track fixes rather nicely. I am aware that I could have used DS Luigi's Mansion in Wave 4, but with GCN Luigi's Mansion Battle Map already in game, as well as Blue Lake in Wave 3, that felt like too much overlap for my taste. And finally, we've reached Wave 6. And we have a lot of tracks already picked out for us. We have 4 tour tracks once again, with 2 cities and 2 Piranha Plant themed Nitro tracks. And Daisy Circuit joins the party as the initial reveal trailer feature track. In addition, we have yet another GCN track to put in there somewhere, and man, I just wonder which track it's going to be. I hope it isn't the only remaining GCN track left in the BCP, which is also these. Anyways, GCN Waluigi Stadium gets to go into the BCP to the surprise of no one, but now we have ourselves a very interesting choice with our Wild Space track. Like I said back in Wave 5, a Bowser's Castle track is a perfect choice for Wave 6, and considering we don't have a retro Bowser's Castle yet, no Airship Fortress doesn't count, I think this spot is the perfect place to put one of the 6 Bowser's Castle forward. I decided not to include the RMS forces because they're weird and worked more by the BCP anyways. I think it's pretty safe to eliminate GBA Bowser's Castle 1, 2, and 3 because they didn't get updated at all, which is a common thread for all the GBA tracks throughout this video. As for the other 3 that remain, SNES Bowser Castle 3 doesn't feel like a good choice because that would put the number of SNES tracks ahead of the number of N64 tracks, which doesn't sit right with me even if we didn't just get an SNES track on that wave. And then we have 3DS Bowser's Castle, which is pretty easily agreed upon to be one of the weakest figure Bowser Castles in the franchise, and thus would be a very disappointing addition to the final wave of the BCP. And thus GBA Bowser's Castle 4 makes its way as part of Wave 6, which should hopefully end the trend of every retro selection having an SNES Mario Circuit and a GBA Bowser's Castle for a while. And at last we get to the final track in the BCP, and yet another weird track to boot. For one, we don't have a leak track that needs to be a priority, but there are some that do seem like higher priority than others here. But ultimately, for the ultimate final track of the biggest Mario Kart game ever, I think the only correct choice here is Rainbow Road. It's a very thematic choice and one of the most popular tracks in the entire franchise, even before its resurgence thanks to being in the BCP. And with that, the BCP remake with way too many rules is done. Despite how many limitations I put on myself and how many bad tracks I forced myself to include, this isn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. Although there are quite a few fantastic tracks that I was forced to cut because of a lack of space or wacky ordering, there were other tracks that got snubbed from the real world BCP that got a chance to shine in this alternate version. I wasn't taking this project very seriously when I first started it, but now that it's done, I'm pretty proud of what I was able to do. There will probably be more for fun videos at some point in the future like this, but with the retro review series still ongoing, and rumors surrounding the next Mario Kart game popping up all over the place, I have plenty of content to fill out the rest of the year and the next. Now if you don't mind me, I'm off to play some Mario Kart DS for next month's video. I will see you all next time.